The Harley's engine cut through the morning silence
Is
like a
this
prayer,
taken?
low, steady reverent.
What? No.
Garrett Holloway twisted the throttle one last time before killing it, completely letting the rumble die in front of the Main Street Diner. 7:15 on a Thursday morning. The kind of morning where Arizona's sun hadn't yet turned mean, where the air still held a memory of coolness from the night before. He swung his leg over the saddle slower than he used to, joints protesting in that language only 67-year-old bones speak, and pulled off his helmet.
I just miss
Gray
him so
hair,
much.
buzz cut,
I know.
military
We're
short
here for
even
you.
23 years after discharge. Old habits, good habits. Behind him, Sarge landed on the pavement with that particular grace only German shepherds possess, 90 pounds of muscle and instinct wrapped in black and tan fur. 8 years old, prime of life for a dog like him. The kind of dog that didn't just see the world, the kind that read it. Garrett was reaching for his keys when Sarge went still. Not the casual still of a dog pausing mid-step. This was combat still, predator still. Every muscle locked, ears forward like satellite dishes, eyes fixed on something Garrett couldn't yet see. Easy, boy. Garrett's hand dropped to Sarge's head. What is it? The dog didn't move, didn't break focus. Just stood there, body coiled like a spring that had forgotten how to release. Garrett followed the line of sight. 50 feet away at the bottom of the wheelchair ramp leading up to the diner's entrance, an old woman sat in a wheelchair. She was pushing arms, straining against the wheel's shoulders, hunched with effort, trying to force the chair up an incline that had probably seemed manageable from the parking lot, but now revealed itself as a small mountain. People walked past her. A man in a business suit, a woman with a coffee cup, a teenager with headphones. They all saw her. Garrett watched their eyes flick toward the woman, register the struggle, then slide away like oil on water. Nobody stopped. Nobody helped. They just kept walking, faces carefully arranged in that particular expression people wear when they've decided something isn't their problem. The woman's arms gave out. The wheelchair rolled backwards 6 inches before she caught it, hands white-knuckled on the rims. Garrett started forward. Sarge moved with him, but not the way he usually did. No casual trot, no lazy follow. The dog positioned himself slightly ahead into the left, body language Garrett had seen only a handful of times in 5 years. The stance Sarge took when something wasn't right, when something needed protecting. Guard mode. Full, absolute, instinctive guard mode. Ma'am, Garrett's voice came out rougher than intended. Morning throat, coffee throat. Let me give you a hand. The woman's head snapped up. Eyes blue as high desert sky. Sharp, assessing. Not grateful, wary. I didn't ask for help. Garrett had already gripped the handles of her wheelchair. Didn't offer it, ma'am. Just doing it. He pushed. The wheelchair rolled up the incline, smooth as silk. 3 seconds of effort. That's all it took. 3 seconds to spare this woman the indignity of struggling, while a dozen people pretended not to notice. At the top of the ramp, he stepped back. The woman turned her chair to face him. 70, maybe 71. Face lined not with age, but with something else. The kind of lines that come from holding yourself together when everything wants to fall apart. Gray hair pulled back in a bun that had probably started the morning neat, but was now listing slightly to port. Cardigan, despite the Arizona heat, buttoned to the throat, hands that trembled just slightly as they gripped the armrests. Thank you, she said. The words came out like they cost something. Like gratitude was a currency she could no longer afford to spend freely. Yes, ma'am. He moved toward the door to hold it open, but she was already pushing through. Independent, determined. The kind of determination that came from practice. From having no choice but to be determined. Sarge hadn't moved. The dog stood exactly where Garrett had stopped, the wheelchair body still locked in that stance. Eyes fixed on the woman. Not aggressive, not threatening, protective, like he'd just been assigned guard duty and was taking it seriously. Sarge, come. The dog's ears twitched. Acknowledgement without compliance. His gaze didn't waver from the woman's retreating back. Sarge. This time the dog moved, but reluctantly, muscles releasing one by one like he was being pulled away from a post he wasn't ready to abandon. Inside the diner smelled like every diner Garrett had ever been in. Coffee, bacon grease, pancake batter, and that particular undertone of industrial cleaning solution. Red vinyl booths lined the windows. Counter running the length of the back wall. Waitress behind the counter, 50-ish name tag that said Dorothy face that said she'd been doing this job since before it stopped being fun. Garrett took his usual spot. Corner booth, back to the wall view of the door. Old habits. Military habits. The kind of habits that kept you alive when alive wasn't guaranteed. He ordered coffee, black. Dorothy didn't ask if he wanted anything else. She knew his routine, coffee first, food later. Same order every Thursday for the past 18 months since he'd started coming here after Kate died and the house got too quiet and the silence started sounding like accusations. Sarge settled under the table, Not relaxed, alert, head up, eyes scanning. The old woman from the wheelchair was 3 booths away, rolling herself up to a table by the window. She positioned the chair locked. The wheels reached for a menu with hands that shook just enough to make the laminated pages rattle. Sarge's head turned to track her movement. Garrett reached down, scratched behind the dog's ears. "What's got into you, boy?" No answer. Just that steady, unwavering focus on a woman they'd never met before this morning. Dorothy brought coffee. Garrett wrapped both hands around the mug, let the heat seep into joints that always ached worse in the morning. 67. Old enough to remember when 67 seemed ancient. Young enough to feel betrayed by the fact it had arrived so fast. He was halfway through the cup when the woman spoke. "Is this seat taken?" Garrett looked up. She'd wheeled herself over to his booth close enough that Sarge was within arm's reach of her chair. The dog hadn't made a sound, hadn't moved, just sat there body positioned between Garrett and this stranger like he was a wall made of fur and loyalty. "No, ma'am." She maneuvered the wheelchair into position across from him, movements practiced but effortful. Up close, Garrett could see more. The cardigan wasn't just buttoned high, it was pulled tight, sleeves tugged down over her wrists, hiding something. The tremor in her hands wasn't constant. It came and went. Stress, not age. Her eyes kept flicking to the door. Not casual glances. Surveillance glances. The kind you made when you were expecting someone you didn't want to see. Sarge moved. Not far, just a repositioning. 3 inches to the left, body angled so he was directly between the woman and the rest of the diner. Then he sat, rigid, attentive, every line of his body screaming one word: protect. "Your dog," the woman said. Her voice carried a slight tremor, too. "He's very alert." "Yes, ma'am. Sarge down." The command was clear, simple. One Garrett had given 1,000 times. Sarge knew it. Sarge always obeyed it. Not this time. The dog stayed sitting, eyes forward, body locked in position. Guard mode, holding steady like a frequency he couldn't quite tune out. "Sarge, down!" Still nothing. No defiance. No rebellion. Just that absolute, immovable certainty that staying alert was more important than obedience. Garrett had never seen him refuse a command. Not once. Not in 5 years. The woman was watching the dog with an expression Garrett couldn't quite read. Not fear. Something else. Recognition, maybe. Or resignation. "He's a smart dog," she said quietly. "He knows when someone's dangerous." "Ma'am, you're not dangerous to you." She looked up, met his eyes. "But I'm dangerous to be around. So maybe your instinct is better than mine was when I sat down." Dorothy arrived with coffee for the woman. Set it down, glanced at Sarge's rigid posture, raised an eyebrow at Garrett. He shook his head slightly. She left. Garrett studied the woman across from him. The cardigan sleeve had ridden up just slightly on her left wrist. There a bruise, purple-yellow, the kind that came from someone's fingers wrapped too tight. 4 distinct marks. Thumb on one side, 3 fingers on the other. She noticed him looking, pulled the sleeve down fast, but not before he saw the other marks smaller higher up on her forearm. Circular, like someone had ground out a cigarette. No, not a cigarette. Wrong color, wrong shape, a fingertip. Someone had pressed a fingertip into her arm hard enough to leave a mark that was still visible days later. Sarge shifted weight. A low sound came from deep in his chest. Not a growl, a rumble. The sound he used to make when something wasn't right, when danger was close, but not close enough to fight yet. "You served," the woman said. It wasn't a question. Garrett nodded. "Desert Storm, my husband, same theater. He was a medic." "Was. He passed 4 months ago." She said it flat, factual. The way you say things when you've said them so many times they've stopped hurting and started just being true. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. They were still shaking. "Your wife," Garrett felt a familiar twist in his chest. The one that came every time someone asked, every time he had to say it out loud and make it real again. 20 months. Stroke. "I'm sorry." They sat in silence. 2 people who'd buried the other half of themselves. 2 people who'd learned that moving on was something people said when they didn't understand that some losses don't move. They stay. They become part of your architecture. The door opened. Sarge's head snapped toward it, ears forward, body tensing like a wire pulled taut. A man walked in, 40s, polo shirt, khakis, sunglasses pushed up on his head. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening, except the woman across from Garrett went pale. Not the slow pale of someone feeling sick. The instant pale of blood draining fast. Fear pale. Her hands tightened on the mug so hard Garrett heard the ceramic creak. The man's eyes swept the diner. Casual, unhurried. They landed on the woman, held for 3 seconds, then he smiled. Not friendly. knowing, the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse right before the paw comes down. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just turned and walked back out the door. The woman was shaking now, full body tremors, coffee slushing in the mug. "Ma'am," Garrett kept his voice low, steady, the voice he'd used in the service when someone was about to panic, and panic would get people killed. "You know that man?" She shook her head, too fast, the universal signal of a lie told by someone who'd never learned how to lie well. "Who was he?" "Nobody." She was already unlocking her wheelchair. "I should go. Thank you for the seat." "Ma'am, please." She looked at him, then really looked at him, and Garrett saw what was behind the sharp blue eyes. Terror. Pure, distilled, absolute terror. "Please don't ask questions. It's better if you don't." She turned the chair, started to wheel away. Something fell from her purse, a piece of paper. It fluttered to the floor beside Sarge. The dog looked at it, looked at Garrett, then very deliberately placed one paw on top of the paper, holding it down, making sure Garrett saw it. The woman didn't notice. She was already at the door, pushing through, moving faster than Garrett would have thought possible for someone in a wheelchair. Desperate fast, running away fast, Garrett reached down, picked up the paper from under Sarge's paw. It was a notice. Official letterhead, Bank of Ridgemont. Final notice. Payment due in 5 days or property will be seized. Amount owed $78,400. Address 892 Cottonwood Lane. That address rang a bell. Cottonwood Lane was his street, 3 houses down from his place. The blue house with the roses out front. The one where the old couple used to live. The couple he'd see sometimes sitting on their porch in the evenings. The man who died sometime in the spring funeral procession Garrett had watched from his garage. The woman who still lived there, alone now. The woman who was currently fleeing the diner like something was chasing her. Garrett looked at Sarge. The dog was staring at the door the woman had gone through. Still in guard mode. Still locked on target even though the target was gone. "What did you see, boy?" Garrett asked quietly. "What did you see that I didn't?" Sarge didn't answer. Dogs never did, but his body language said everything his voice couldn't. Something was wrong. Someone needed protecting. And every instinct in that 8-year-old German shepherd's body was screaming that the woman who just left was in danger. Garrett had learned to trust those instincts. 5 years ago, Sarge had saved Kate from a home invasion. The dog had heard the intruder before Garrett even knew someone was in the house, had attacked without hesitation, driven the man off before he could do more than crack Kate over the head with a piece of pipe. The doctor said later, 4 months later, when Kate had the stroke that killed her, that the head injury might have caused a blood clot. Might have been the reason she died. Might have been. Garrett had learned not to think about the might have beens. They'd eat you alive if you let them. But he'd also learned this: when Sarge went into guard mode, there was a reason. The dog didn't see the world the way people did. Didn't get distracted by words or explanations or social niceties. He saw threat. He saw danger. He saw who needed protecting. And from the moment that woman had struggled up the wheelchair ramp Sarge had decided she needed protecting, Garrett looked at the notice in his hand. 5 days. $78,000. Property seizure. He thought about the bruises on her wrist, the burn mark on her arm, the terror in her eyes when that man walked into the diner. The way she'd said, "It's better if you don't ask questions." People said that for 2 reasons. Either they were guilty and didn't want to get caught, or they were victims and didn't want to get hurt worse. Everything about that woman screamed victim. Dorothy came over with the coffee pot. "Your neighbor?" she asked, topping off his mug. Didn't know she was until just now. "Evelyn Brennan, nice lady. Used to come in here with her husband every Sunday. Harold, good man. Died of cancer back in the spring." Dorothy shook her head. "Terrible thing, just terrible. And now her all alone in that house, in that chair." "The chair? That from the cancer?" "No, car accident, 2 years back. They got T-boned at the intersection of Route 60 and Maple. Harold walked away with bruises." "Evelyn," she trailed off, shrugged. "Spinal damage. Doctors said she'd never walk again. Medical bills." "Oh, I imagine so. That kind of injury, that kind of care insurance only covers so much. You know." Garrett knew Kate's hospital bills from the stroke had been $90,000. Insurance covered $60,000. The rest had come out of savings. If Kate had lived longer, if she'd needed more care, Garrett would have burned through everything they had. As it was, she died fast enough that he still had money left. Terrible thing to be grateful for. But there it was. He paid for his coffee, left a good tip. Dorothy had been kind to him in the months after Kate died, never asked too many questions, never pushed too hard on days when he couldn't quite make conversation work. Outside, the morning had turned hot. 9 a.m. in Arizona meant the sun had decided it was time to remind everyone who was in charge. Sarge trotted to the Harley, waited for Garrett to mount up, then jumped into the sidecar attached to the bike's right side. The sidecar was a recent addition, something Garrett had built himself 6 months after Kate died, when the silence of riding alone got too loud. Sarge rode in it like a king in a chariot, head up ears, back eyes scanning the road ahead. Garrett kicked the engine to life, let it rumble, let it drown out thoughts for a minute. Then he rode home, past the post office, past the library, past the elementary school where Evelyn Brennan had probably taught before she retired, past the gas station and the mechanic shop that used to be his before he sold it to young Marcus Webb 2 years back and kept just the small garage attached to his house, past the blue house with the roses. There was a car in the driveway, black sedan, same one from the diner parking lot. Garrett slowed. Not obvious, just a casual decrease in speed. Enough to get a look. The car was empty, but the front door of the house was open. Not wide open, just cracked. 6 inches of darkness visible in the gap. Sarge was staring at the house. That same rigid attention, that same frequency he couldn't tune out. Garrett made himself keep riding. 3 more houses, his place. 896 Cottonwood Lane, single-story ranch, detached garage out back. Lawn that was more dirt than grass because Garrett had never cared much about landscaping and cared even less after Kate died. He parked the Harley, killed the engine, sat there in the sudden silence. "We don't know her," he said out loud, to himself, to Sarge, to the ghost of Kate that sometimes felt close enough to touch. "We don't know what's going on. Not our business." Sarge jumped out of the sidecar, didn't head for the house, headed for the street, stopped, looked back at Garrett. "Not our business," Garrett said again. The dog waited. Garrett thought about Kate, about the night she died. He'd been in the garage working on an old Triumph somebody had brought in, completely absorbed in the problem of a carburetor that wouldn't hold a tune. Kate had been in the house. She'd called his name. Once. Soft. He'd heard it, but hadn't responded immediately, just held up a finger in that universal gesture of "give me 1 second." That second stretched to 5 minutes. When he went inside, she was on the kitchen floor. Stroke. Massive. The doctor said later she'd probably been dead before she hit the ground. Said there was nothing Garrett could have done even if he'd been standing right next to her. But he hadn't been standing next to her. He'd been in the garage, ignoring her voice, choosing an engine over his wife. 1 second. That's all she'd asked for. And he'd said, not yet. He thought about Evelyn Brennan, about the bruises, about the terror, about the man in the black sedan now sitting in her driveway, about the way she'd said, "Please don't ask questions." Some people asked questions because they wanted to help. Some asked because they were nosy. Some asked because they couldn't stand the idea of walking away. Garrett had spent 20 months walking away, from neighbors who tried to check on him, from friends who wanted him to get back out there, from a world that kept insisting he should move on when he couldn't figure out how to move at all. He'd gotten good at walking away. Expert level, but Sarge was still standing there, still waiting, still locked on that invisible signal that said someone needed protecting. And Kate's voice memory, or ghost, or imagination, didn't matter which whispered in the back of his mind, "Don't let your heart get as hard as the bolts you turn, Garrett. Don't let it." He'd failed that promise for 20 months. Every day choosing the garage over people, choosing silence over connection, choosing the safe known territory of engines and metal over the messy, complicated business of caring. Maybe it was time to stop failing it. Garrett stood up, started walking toward the blue house 3 doors down. Sarge fell in beside him, no longer waiting. Moving with purpose now, partner stance. The way they used to move together when they'd go on long walks before Kate died and everything fell apart. The black sedan was still in the driveway. Engine off, windows up, the front door was still cracked open. Garrett climbed the porch steps. Old wood, needed replacing. He could do that, knew how, just needed lumber and time and focus. He knocked, 3 solid raps, official, deliberate. No answer. He knocked again. "Mrs. Brennan, it's Garrett Holloway. From down the street, just checking if everything's all right." Still no answer. But he heard something. A voice. Male. Low. The tone people use when they want to be threatening without yelling. Garrett put his hand on the door. Pushed gently. It swung open. Inside the house was neat. Almost obsessively so. Hardwood floors polished to a shine. Furniture arranged with military precision. Photos on the walls. Evelyn and a man Garrett assumed was Harold Younger, smiling arms around each other in front of the Grand Canyon. Another photo, Harold in Desert Fatigue's Medical Corps insignia visible. The voice was coming from the living room, around the corner, out of sight. "Mrs. Brennan, I'm coming in," Garrett called out, loud, clear, giving her warning, giving whoever was with her warning too. Sarge moved ahead. Not aggressive, scouting, the way he used to scout terrain when Garrett would take him hiking in the mountains. Garrett followed, turned the corner into the living room. Two men, both in their 40s, both wearing polo shirts and khakis like they'd coordinated, both standing over Evelyn, who sat in her wheelchair with her hands gripped white-knuckled on the armrests. The taller 162 buzz-cut arms that said he spent time in a gym turned toward Garrett. "This is private property, old man. You need to leave." Garrett didn't move. "Mrs. Brennan, you want me to leave?" She was shaking, full-body tremors, eyes locked on the floor. She's fine," the shorter one said. 50 maybe, receding hairline, scar over his left eyebrow. "We're just having a conversation about some financial matters. Nothing that concerns you." "Seemed like she was fine when she asked if anyone was sitting at my table this morning," Garrett said quietly. "Seems less fine now." The tall one took a step forward. Aggressive posture, chest out, chin up, the body language of someone used to intimidation working. Sarge growled, not loud, not dramatic, just a low rolling rumble that came from somewhere deep in his chest. The sound that said, "I am very good at what I do, and what I do is protect. Test me and find out." The tall one stopped moving. "You need to leave," the shorter one said again, "before this gets ugly." "It's already ugly," Garrett said. "Two grown men in a woman's house making her shake like that. That's about as ugly as it gets. This is business, legal business. Mrs. Brennan owes money. We're here to collect." "You collectors or enforcers?" The tall one smiled. No warmth in it. "What's the difference? Collectors work during business hours. They send letters. They make phone calls. They don't show up at someone's house at 9 in the morning and close the door behind them." "Smart old man," the shorter one said, "but not smart enough. Walk away while you still can." Garrett looked at Evelyn. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face, shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself smaller. Invisible. He thought about Kate, about finding her on the kitchen floor, about all the ways he'd failed to protect her because he'd assumed he'd have more time. Assumed tomorrow was guaranteed. He thought about the notice in his pocket. 5 days. $78,000. He thought about the bruises on Evelyn's wrist, the burn mark on her arm, and he made a choice. "I'm not walking away." The tall one moved fast, faster than Garrett expected for a man that size. Closing the distance in 2 steps, hand reaching out to grab Garrett's shirt, Sarge launched. 90 pounds of trained German shepherd hitting the tall man's center mass. They went down together, the man's head cracking against the hardwood floor hard enough to make a sound like a baseball bat hitting concrete. The dog didn't bite, didn't need to, just stood on the man's chest teeth an inch from his throat, growl steady and certain. The shorter one reached for something at his belt. Garrett moved, not fast, not flashy, just efficient, the way the Army had taught him 30 years ago. "Step in, grab the wrist, twist, apply pressure to the elbow joint." The man went down on one knee, gasping. "Hands where I can see them," Garrett said quietly. The man complied, slowly. On his belt, not a gun, a knife, folding blade, civilian carry, nothing fancy. Garrett removed it, pocketed it, released the man's wrist. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," the shorter one said. He was breathing hard, sweating, but his eyes were steady, certain. "Wade Kimball doesn't forget, he doesn't forgive, and he sure as hell doesn't lose." "Wade Kimball," Garrett repeated. "He your boss. He's your nightmare. You just don't know it yet." The tall one was trying to push Sarge off his chest. Not successfully. The dog had found a comfortable spot and was settling in. "Sarge, off!" The dog backed away, reluctantly, still growling, still ready. "Get out," Garrett said. "We're not done here," the shorter one said. "Yeah, you are." Garrett kept his voice level, calm, but he shifted his weight slightly. The posture that said he'd done this before, that said trying him wasn't the smart play. The two men looked at each other, some kind of silent communication. Then the tall one stood up slow, one hand on the back of his head where it had hit the floor. They headed for the door. At the threshold, the shorter one turned back. 5 days, Mrs. Brennan, then we're back with the sheriff, and you'll wish you dealt with us instead. They left. The black sedan started up, pulled out of the driveway, disappeared down Cottonwood Lane. Garrett closed the door, locked it, turned around. Evelyn was still crying, still shaking. Hands over her face now, small sounds escaping between her fingers. Sarge moved to her, put his head on her knee, gentle, the way he used to do with Kate when she was upset. Evelyn's hand came down, touched the dog's head, and something broke. The crying got louder, messier, the kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and hadn't been allowed out in a long time. Garrett stood there, uncomfortable. He'd never been good at this part, the emotional part. Kate had been the one who knew what to say when someone was hurting. Garrett just knew how to fix engines. But engines weren't what needed fixing here. He waited, because sometimes that was all you could do. Wait until the storm passed. Eventually, 5 minutes, 10 time got strange when someone was breaking down in front of you. Evelyn got quiet. She wiped her face with her sleeve, took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "No need to be sorry, ma'am. You shouldn't have done that. Her voice broke. "Now you're in danger too." Garrett pulled out a chair from her dining table, sat down. Sarge stayed next to Evelyn, head still on her knee. "Ma'am Evelyn, I think it's time you tell me what's going on." She shook her head. "You don't want to know. You don't want to be involved. Already involved. Moment I pushed your wheelchair up that ramp, I was involved. Moment Sarge decided you needed protecting, I was involved. And moment those two men threatened you in your own home, I was definitely involved." He leaned forward. "So help me understand. Who's Wade Kimball? Why do you owe $78,000? And why are men showing up at your house putting hands on you?" Evelyn was quiet for a long time. Outside, a car drove past. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Normal sounds, normal day. Except nothing about this was normal. Finally, she spoke. "Harold, my husband, he died 4 months ago. Lung cancer. We knew it was coming, had time to prepare, or thought we did." She paused, gathered herself. 2 years before that, we had a car accident. T-bone collision. Harold was driving, walked away with bruises. She gestured at the wheelchair. "This spinal injury. Doctors said I'd never walk again. I'm sorry. Medical bills were $340,000. Insurance covered $180. We still owed $160. Her hands twisted in her lap. "Harold took out a second mortgage. $160,000 against the house. It was all we had left. This house. We bought it in 1978. Raised our whole life here. No children, so it was just us. Just our home." She took another breath. "But the mortgage wasn't enough. I needed physical therapy, specialized equipment, medications. The costs kept coming. And Harold's cancer, we found it a year after my accident. Stage 4. Treatment was expensive. Experimental drugs weren't covered. We were drowning. That's when Wade Kimball showed up," Garrett said. 18 months ago. Harold was desperate. The bank wouldn't give us another loan. We had no family to borrow from. And then Wade appeared. Said he could help. Said he specialized in helping veterans. Harold served in Desert Storm, Medical Corps. Same operation you did." Garrett felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How much did Kimball lend you?" $80,000. Interest rate. Evelyn looked at the floor. 38%. Christ, Garrett ran a hand over his face. "That's loan sharking. Illegal in Arizona. Maximum legal rate is 10%. I know that now. But Harold was dying. He couldn't think straight. The pain medication, the chemo, it made him foggy. And Wade was so kind, so understanding. He said he'd helped dozens of veterans. Said he just wanted to give back." Her voice turned bitter. "He gave back all right. He gave us a death sentence. Harold didn't understand the terms. He understood we needed money. He understood the house was collateral. But the interest rate, the compound structure, the balloon payment, all that fine print, Wade rushed him through. He didn't catch it. Didn't realize what he was signing. When did Harold pass? 4 months ago, March. And that's when I learned the truth. Wade showed up a week after the funeral. Said the loan was due. All of it. 80,000 plus accumulated interest. 114,000 total. Plus the 78 you owe the bank. $192,400. She said it like an execution date. I have 31,000 in savings. 15,000 from Harold's life insurance. That's it. That's everything we have left. Wade won't take partial payment. Wade doesn't want money." Evelyn looked up, met his eyes. "He wants the house. This house is worth $285,000. He'll take it for $114,000 in debt, sell it for full value, pocket the difference." Garrett felt rage building, the cold, controlled kind that had gotten him through combat, the kind that didn't explode, just focused. "How many others?" he asked. "What? How many other people has he done this to?" Evelyn's face went pale. "You know, Dorothy at the diner mentioned you're not the only one. Said Wade Kimball has a reputation." "How many, Evelyn?" She closed her eyes. 43 families that I know of, over the past 12 years, all of them veterans or veteran families. All of them desperate. All of them trapped in the same contract Harold signed. Her voice dropped to a whisper. 7 of them committed suicide. The shame of losing everything, the hopelessness. 3 marriages ended in divorce. The rest just disappeared, left town, started over somewhere else, if they could, and nobody stopped him. The sheriff is his younger brother, Dalton Kimball, 48 years old, been sheriff for 6 years. Wade pays him. I don't know how much, but enough that Dalton looks the other way, enough that complaints disappear, enough that Wade operates in this town like he owns it. Garrett stood up, paced to the window, looked out at Cottonwood Lane. Quiet street, good neighborhood, the kind of place where people trusted each other, where they didn't lock their doors, where they believed the system worked, except the system didn't work when it was rigged. 5 days, he said. That's what the notice says. 5 days until they seize the house. Wade will have his men here with the sheriff, legal paperwork, all proper and official. And I'll have to leave. 48 years in this house. Every memory of Harold, every piece of the life we built, gone. She was crying again. Quieter this time, the exhausted crying of someone who'd cried too much already. Sarge whined, pushed his head harder against her knee. Garrett turned back from the window. You have anyone else, family, friends who could help? No family. Harold was an only child. So am I. Friends, the ones who are left, they're all in the same situation. Living on fixed incomes, barely making it themselves. What about legal help? I called a lawyer in Phoenix. He said I have a case, that the contract is probably unconscionable, that I could fight it in court. She laughed. No humor in it, but the retainer alone is $15,000. And even if I win, even if the court voids the contract, that takes time, months, maybe years. Wade will seize the house long before then. Garrett was quiet, thinking, calculating. He had money. Not a fortune, but the sale of his garage 2 years ago had brought in decent money. Kate's life insurance, his pension, his savings. Combined probably close to $186,000. Enough to pay off Evelyn's debts, both the bank and Wade Kimball, with enough left over to live on for a few more years until he couldn't work anymore. But handing Evelyn that money wouldn't solve the problem. She'd never take it. Pride, independence. The same reasons she'd said, I didn't ask for help when he pushed her wheelchair up the ramp. And even if she did take it, what about the other 43 families? What about the next desperate veteran Wade Kimball would find? No. Money wasn't the answer. Not alone. The answer was stopping Wade Kimball. Permanently. Evelyn, Garrett said slowly, what if there was a way to fight him? Not just save your house, stop him completely. Make sure he never does this again. She looked at him like he'd suggested flying to the moon. There's no way. Wade owns this town. He has the sheriff. He has lawyers. He has money and power, and he has 43 victims who could testify against him. He has a pattern of illegal lending. He has evidence scattered across a dozen years if someone knew where to look. Garrett sat back down. What he doesn't have is people willing to stand up to him. People tired of being afraid. People ready to fight back. You're talking about going after Wade Kimball. Evelyn's voice was flat, disbelieving. You don't even know me. Why would you? Because Sarge says you're worth protecting. Garrett looked at the dog. And in 5 years, he's never been wrong about a person. Not once. Evelyn followed his gaze. Sarge was looking back at both of them. Calm now. Alert but not tense. Like he'd accomplished his mission. Like he'd brought the right people together. And now it was up to them to do the rest. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Garrett leaned forward. I lost my wife 20 months ago. Since then, I've been going through the motions, fixing engines, drinking coffee, existing. Kate used to tell me, don't let your heart get as hard as the bolts you turn, Garrett. Don't let it. I failed that promise. Every day for 20 months, I chose metal over people, chose silence over connection, chose the easy path of not caring because caring hurt too much. He paused, met her eyes. I'm done choosing the easy path. You need help. I can help. And maybe in helping you, I can start keeping the promise I made to my wife. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. Outside, the morning had turned into afternoon. The light through the windows had shifted from golden to white. Hot light, unforgiving light. Finally, she spoke. If you do this, if you really try to help me, Wade will come after you. He'll ruin you. He'll take everything you have. He might even... She stopped. Couldn't say it. Might even kill me. Garrett finished. I've been in combat, Evelyn. I've been shot at by people who actually knew how to shoot. I've spent 7 months in the desert wondering if every step was the one that would trip a mine. I'm not scared of Wade Kimball. You should be. Maybe, but fear is a poor reason not to do the right thing. He stood up. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to make some calls, talk to some people, We're going to find a way to fight Wade Kimball legally properly by the book. And in 5 days, when he shows up to take your house, he's going to find out that you're not alone anymore, that there are people willing to stand with you. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you do this for a stranger? Garrett thought about Kate. About the second she'd asked for that, he'd never given her. About all the seconds that had added up to a life spent together and lost too soon. He thought about Sarge, about the way the dog had instantly shifted into guard mode the moment he saw Evelyn struggling up that ramp. About instinct, about trust, about knowing who deserved protection. Because you're not a stranger, he said quietly. You're my neighbor. You're a veteran's widow. You're someone who needs help. And because my dog, who knows more about people than I ever will, looked at you and decided you were worth protecting, I'm inclined to trust his judgment. Evelyn put her face in her hands, shoulders shaking, but not crying this time. Something else. Relief, maybe, or disbelief, or the overwhelm that comes when you've been alone for so long that kindness feels foreign. Sarge stayed right where he was, head on her knee, patient, certain. Guard mode had shifted into comfort mode, but the core mission remained the same. Protect. Because instinct never lies. And every instinct in that dog's body, every hard-earned lesson from 5 years with Garrett, from saving Kate from learning to read people without the filter of words, said that Evelyn Brennan deserved protection. Garrett watched them. Woman and dog. Stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore. Neighbor who'd become something more in the space of 3 hours and one decision to not walk away. Kate's voice whispered in his memory, "This is how you honor me, Garrett. Not by mourning forever, by living like I taught you, by choosing people, by choosing kindness, by choosing to care even when caring costs something." He'd been failing that lesson for 20 months. Time to stop failing. Time to start living again. Even if living meant picking a fight with a loan shark who owned the sheriff and had crushed 43 families before this one. Even if living meant risking everything he had left. Even if living meant accepting that some battles choose you, and the only real choice is whether you fight or run. Garrett Holloway had run from enough things, from grief, from connection, from the messy, painful, necessary business of being human. He was done running. "We're going to win this," he said out loud, to Evelyn, to Sarge, to himself. "I don't know how yet, but we're going to win." And somewhere in memory or spirit or the space between heartbeats, Kate smiled, because her husband was finally coming back to life, and it was about damn time. The first thing Garrett did was go home, not to hide, not to second-guess himself, but to think, to plan, to approach this the way he'd approached problems in the military, methodically, carefully, with respect for the enemy's capabilities and clear understanding of his own limitations. He was 67 years old. He had a dog, a motorcycle, and a garage full of tools. He had savings and a pension and enough pride not to use either one stupidly. What he didn't have was legal training, political connections, or any experience taking down corrupt loan sharks protected by corrupt sheriffs. What he did have was 30 years of fixing things people said couldn't be fixed. Engines with blown gaskets, transmissions that had stripped their gears, electrical systems that had shorted out so badly the previous owner had given up and junked the whole vehicle. Garrett had learned early that impossible just meant nobody had figured out the right approach yet. Wade Kimball was a problem. Problems had solutions. You just had to find the right tools. Sarge followed him into the garage, the small one attached to the house, not the big commercial operation he'd sold 2 years back. The space smelled like motor oil and metal shavings, and that particular combination of grease and solvent that never quite washed out no matter how many times you mopped the floor. Kate used to complain about the smell, gently, teasingly. "You're going to die smelling like a carburetor, Garrett Holloway in St. Peter's, going to make you shower before he lets you through the gates." He'd always laughed, kissed her forehead, gone right back to whatever engine was demanding his attention. Now the garage just smelled like loneliness. Garrett sat down at his workbench, pulled out a notebook, the same kind he'd used in the Army, spiral-bound, water-resistant cover pages gridded for technical drawings. He'd gone through hundreds of these over the years. Engine specs, repair notes, modification plans, all of it meticulous, all of it organized. This time he wrote a different kind of list. What we know: Wade Kimball, loan shark. 43 families victimized over 12 years. Interest rates of 38%. Sheriff Dalton Kimball is his brother and protector. Pattern of targeting veterans and veteran families. What we need: legal evidence. Multiple testimonies. Federal involvement if state law enforcement is compromised. Someone with legal expertise to guide the process. What we have: Evelyn Brennan's contract. My testimony of the 2 enforcers at her house. Dorothy's second-hand knowledge. 5 days before seizure. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He looked at Sarge. The dog had settled near the workbench, chin on pause, eyes half closed, but ears still tracking every sound. Alert even at rest. The way military dogs learn to be. "We need help, boy," Garrett said quietly. "Can't do this alone." Sarge's tail thumped once against the concrete floor. Agreement or acknowledgement with dogs, it was hard to tell the difference. Garrett picked up his phone. An old flip model. He'd resisted smartphones the way he'd resisted most new technology, not out of principle, but out of indifference. The flip phone made calls. That was enough. He scrolled through contacts. Not many, a dozen maybe. Marcus Webb, who'd bought his garage. A few old Army buddies he hadn't talked to in years. Dorothy from the diner. The number for his doctor, his bank, his insurance agent, and Pastor William Hutchins. Garrett hadn't been to church since Kate's funeral. The whole experience had left a bad taste, all those well-meaning people saying things like, "She's in a better place," and "God needed another angel." Like Kate was a chess piece God had moved instead of a woman who died too young and left him behind. But William had been different. The pastor had shown up at Garrett's door 3 days after the funeral with a casserole and no sermon, had sat in the garage for 2 hours not talking about God or grief or anything except the Triumph Bonneville Garrett was working on, had asked good questions about engine timing and compression ratios, had made Garrett feel like a person instead of a tragedy. Before leaving, William had said, "I'm here if you need me, for anything, God stuff, not God stuff, whatever." Garrett hadn't called, hadn't needed to. Until now, the phone rang 4 times before William picked up. "Holloway residence." The voice was warm, deep, carried the slight rasp of someone who'd spent decades projecting to the back of a church without a microphone. "Pastor, it's Garrett." A pause. Then, "Garrett, good to hear from you. Everything all right? Need to talk to you about something. In person, if you've got time. For you always. Want to come by the church?" Garrett thought about it. Churches had eyes. Churches had gossip networks more efficient than any intelligence agency. If he and William met there, word would spread. And word spreading meant Wade Kimball hearing about it. "My garage. Say 4 o'clock. I'll be there." The line went dead. Garrett set the phone down, checked his watch. 1:30. 2.5 hours to figure out exactly what he was going to ask for. He spent the time doing what he always did when he needed to think, working on an engine. This one was a 1973 Honda CB 750 brought in by a college kid who'd inherited it from his grandfather and wanted to get it running again. The carburetors were gummed up with old fuel. The points were corroded. The battery was dead as a brick, but the engine was fundamentally sound. Good bones. Just needed someone willing to put in the work to bring it back to life. Garrett lost himself in the process. Disassembly, cleaning, inspection. Each part examined, evaluated, cleaned, or replaced as needed. Methodical work. Satisfying work. The kind where you could see progress in real time. Sarge watched from his spot near the door. Occasionally, the dog would stand, stretch, make a circuit of the garage, then settle back down. Patrol behavior, making sure the perimeter was secure. At 3:55, a car pulled into the driveway. Garrett didn't look up from the carburetor he was cleaning. Just listened to the sound of the engine 4-cylinder, smooth idle recent oil change and the door opening and closing. Footsteps on gravel. Then William's voice. "Knocking seems redundant when the door's wide open. Come on in, Pastor." William Hutchins was 73 years old and looked like Central Casting's idea of a small-town minister. White hair, warm eyes, cardigan, despite the Arizona heat hands that were surprisingly strong from decades of shaking hands and moving furniture for church potlucks. He'd been pastor at First Baptist for 31 years, knew everyone in Ridgemont, was trusted by everyone in Ridgemont, which was exactly what Garrett needed. "Coffee?" Garrett asked, not looking up from his work. "If you're making some." Garrett gestured at the ancient coffee maker in the corner. "Help yourself. Fair warning, it's been sitting since this morning. I've drunk worse." William poured himself a cup, took a sip, made a face. "Barely." Garrett allowed himself a small smile, set down the carburetor, wiped his hands on a rag, turned to face the pastor properly. "Appreciate you coming. Appreciate you calling. Been wondering how you were doing out here." William took another sip of coffee, grimaced again. "Alone. Working? Not talking to anyone. Been managing. Managing isn't living, Garrett. Didn't call you here for a sermon." William raised both hands. Peace gesture. "Fair enough. What did you call me here for?" Garrett told him. "All of it." Evelyn struggling up the wheelchair ramp, Sarge's instant protective reaction. The notice for property seizure, the 2 men at Evelyn's house, Wade Kimball, the 43 families. The sheriff, who was Wade's brother. William listened without interrupting. His face got harder as the story went on. By the end, he was gripping his coffee mug tight enough that Garrett could see white knuckles. "Wade Kimball," William said quietly. "Yes, I know about Wade. Dorothy said he's got a reputation." "Reputation," William laughed. No humor. That's one word for it. Predator would be another. Vulture, parasite. Pick your metaphor. Wade Kimball has been bleeding this town dry for 12 years, and I've watched it happen. Watched good people lose everything. Watched families torn apart. Watched three men put guns in their mouths because the shame of losing their homes was more than they could carry. You tried to help. I did what I could. Counseling, food bank, church discretionary funds to help with small emergencies. But Garrett, we're talking about debts in the hundreds of thousands. The church doesn't have that kind of money. Nobody in Ridgemont does, except Wade. William set down his mug. I've tried going to authorities. State Attorney General's office. FBI. Every time, same answer, need more evidence. Need victims willing to testify. Need proof of federal crimes. And every time I get close to finding someone brave enough to speak up, Wade gets to them first. Threatens them, pays them off, makes them disappear. Evelyn said 7 of the 43 committed suicide. William's eyes went distant. I buried 4 of them. Good men, veterans, people who'd served their country and came home and thought they were safe, thought the system would protect them. They were wrong. The garage went quiet. Outside, a motorcycle went past, not a Harley something, Japanese higher-pitched engine note. Sarge's ears tracked it until the sound faded. I need names, Garrett said. The other victims, the ones still alive, the ones still in Ridgemont, people who might be willing to testify if they knew they weren't alone. William looked at him carefully. You're really going to do this. Take on Wade Kimball. Don't have much choice. He's coming for Evelyn's house in 5 days. And after that, Garrett shrugged. After that, he'll find someone else. And someone else, until someone stops him. Why you? Why now? Garrett thought about how to answer that, about Kate's voice in his head, about Sarge's instant certainty that Evelyn needed protecting, about 20 months of choosing not to care because caring hurt too much. Because I'm tired, he said finally, tired of watching good people get crushed, tired of doing nothing, tired of being the kind of man who turns away when someone needs help. William studied him, reading something in Garrett's face that Garrett hadn't put into words. Then the pastor nodded slowly. I can get you names, addresses. But Garrett, most of these people are scared. Some of them signed NDAs as part of settlement agreements. Some of them are still paying Wade reduced amounts just to keep their homes. Asking them to testify is asking them to risk everything all over again. I know. And if Wade finds out you're organizing against him, he'll come after me. I know that too. He won't just come after you. He'll destroy you, your home, your savings, your reputation. He'll make you wish you'd never heard Evelyn Brennan's name. Garrett met the pastor's eyes. Let him try. Something shifted in William's expression. A decision made. He reached into his cardigan pocket, pulled out a small notebook, similar to Garrett's, spiral-bound and worn, flipped through pages covered in neat handwriting. I keep records, William said quietly. Every family that's come to me for help. Every conversation about Wade Kimball. Dates, names, amounts owed. I told myself I was documenting for the day when someone finally did something. Started to think that day would never come. He tore out 3 pages, handed them to Garrett. 22 names, 22 addresses, 22 brief notations about circumstances and current status. These are the ones still in Ridgemont, William said. Still alive, still struggling, most of them elderly, all of them ashamed. But maybe if they see someone willing to stand up to Wade, they'll find courage too. Garrett took the pages, folded them carefully, put them in his shirt pocket. I'm going to need more than courage, he said. I'm going to need someone who understands the law, someone who can build a case that'll stand up in court, someone who knows how to navigate the legal system when the local law enforcement is compromised. William smiled, actually smiled. You need Douglas Merrick. Who's Douglas Merrick? Former federal prosecutor, retired here about 8 years ago, bought a little house on Elm Street, keeps to himself mostly, but before he retired, Douglas put away white-collar criminals for 23 years. Fraud, embezzlement, racketeering. He knows federal law inside and out. Why'd he retire here? The smile faded. Lost his son, Benjamin, good kid, 28 years old, got caught up with a loan shark in California. Different man, same game as Wade. Benny couldn't pay. The shame of it, the debt, the failure, the disappointment he thought he'd caused his father, it was too much. He killed himself. Garrett felt something cold in his chest. Douglas knew what happened. Knew, blamed himself for not seeing the signs earlier, for being so focused on his career that he missed his own son drowning in debt. He retired 6 months after the funeral. Moved here to get away from memories. But I think, William paused, I think he also moved here hoping to find redemption. hoping to help someone the way he couldn't help Benny. Think he'll help us? I think if you tell him what Wade's been doing, if you show him those names, if you give him a chance to stop another family from going through what his went through, William nodded. Yes, I think he'll help. Garrett glanced at the clock on the garage wall. 4:30. Where does Douglas live? I'll drive you. He doesn't take well to strangers showing up unannounced. But if I introduce you, he'll listen. They took William's car, a sensible sedan that smelled like old hymnals and peppermint candies. Sarge rode in the back seat, alert and watchful. The drive to Elm Street took 7 minutes through quiet neighborhoods where lawns were brown from summer heat and American flags hung limp in the still air. Douglas Merrick's house was small, single-story ranch, paint fading, lawn unmowed, newspapers piling up on the porch, the kind of house that screamed, "I've given up," in every detail. William knocked 3 times, waited, knocked again. A full minute passed before the door cracked open, chains still engaged. "William?" The voice was rough, unused. "Not a good time. Never is with you, Douglas. But I've got someone you need to meet. Garrett Holloway, retired mechanic, Army veteran, good man." Silence from behind the door. "He's got a problem that needs a lawyer." William continued, "The kind of problem you used to solve for a living. The kind that might give you a reason to shower and leave the house." "I'm retired." "You're hiding. There's a difference." Another silence, then the chain rattled. The door opened. Douglas Merrick was 71 years old and looked like he'd been carved from granite left out in the rain too long. Tall, 6'3", but stooped, gaunt, gray beard grown wild. Eyes that had probably been sharp once but were now just tired. "5 minutes," he said. "Then I'm closing this door and you can take your good man somewhere else." They went inside. The house was dark, curtains drawn, smelled like stale coffee and unwashed laundry, and the particular mustiness of a place where windows never opened. Papers everywhere, stacked on tables covering the couch, spread across the floor. Legal documents, case files, old prosecution records Douglas had apparently brought home and never filed away. There was one clear space, a leather chair facing a blank television, an empty bottle on the side table. Whiskey from the label, expensive kind. "Sit," Douglas said, gesturing vaguely at a couch buried in paperwork. He didn't clear the papers, just waited while Garrett and William moved them enough to perch on the edge of the cushions. Sarge stayed standing, watching Douglas with that same assessment he'd given Evelyn. Not guard mode, something else. Evaluation mode. "Talk," Douglas said. He hadn't sat down, just stood there, arms crossed, face closed. So Garrett talked, same story, same details. But this time he pulled out William's list. 22 names, 22 families. Douglas took the list, read it. His face didn't change, but something happened to his hands. They started shaking, just slightly. Just enough that the paper rattled. "Wade Kimball," Douglas said. "I know the name. Tried to investigate him 4 years ago. Spent 2 months building a case. Loan sharking, usury, fraud." Then the victims started recanting, withdrawing their statements, refusing to testify. Every single one. The case collapsed. "Wade got to them," William said. "Of course he got to them. He always gets to them. That's how predators like him survive. They don't just threaten. They systematically destroy anyone who speaks against them. And they make sure everyone else knows what happens when you fight back." "So you gave up," Garrett said. Flat. Not quite accusatory, but not sympathetic either. Douglas's eyes snapped to him. "I didn't give up. I got reassigned. My supervisor, who I later learned was playing golf with Wade's lawyer every weekend, decided I was wasting bureau resources on a local matter. Transferred me to tax fraud. By the time I could circle back, the statute of limitations had run out on half the cases." He dropped the list on the coffee table. "This is pointless. Wade owns this town. He owns the sheriff. He owns half the city council. He's got lawyers on retainer who make more in a month than most people make in a year. You can't beat him. People have tried. They always lose." "Maybe they tried alone," Garrett said. "Maybe they didn't have 22 other families willing to testify. Maybe they didn't have a former federal prosecutor who knows exactly how to build a case that'll hold up. I'm not a prosecutor anymore. I'm a washed-up old man who couldn't even save his own son." The words hung in the air. Raw, bitter, true in the way that deepest wounds are always true. William started to say something, but Garrett held up a hand. "Stop. Let me." "My wife died 20 months ago," Garrett said quietly. "Kate, stroke. She called my name. I was in the garage working. Told her to give me a second. That second turned into 5 minutes. By the time I got inside, she was dead on the kitchen floor. Doctors said there was nothing I could have done. Said the stroke was massive. Said she died instantly." Soon he paused, met Douglas's eyes. "But I'll never know, will I? I'll never know if that 5 minutes made a difference. If I'd been there when she fell, maybe I could have called 911 faster. Maybe she'd have gotten treatment that saved her life. Maybe not. But I chose an engine over my wife, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. Douglas was very still. So yeah, Garrett continued, I understand guilt. I understand regret. I understand looking in the mirror every morning and seeing the man who failed when it mattered most. But here's what I also understand, that guilt doesn't bring them back. Kate's not coming back. Your son's not coming back. And we can spend the rest of our lives hiding in dark houses, drowning in whiskey and shame. Careful, Douglas said softly, dangerously. Or we can honor them by making sure other people don't go through what they went through, what we went through. We can take all that pain and guilt and rage and point it at someone who deserves it. Someone like Wade Kimball. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then Sarge moved, walked over to Douglas, sat down directly in front of him, looked up with those steady brown eyes that seemed to see through pretense straight to truth. Douglas looked down at the dog, his face cracked. Just slightly. Just enough that Garrett could see the man underneath the grief. I haven't practiced law in 8 years, Douglas said. Riding a bike, William said gently. Never really forget. I don't have an office, don't have staff, don't have resources. You have knowledge, Garrett said. You have experience. You have 22 families who need someone who knows how to fight. Douglas bent down, slowly, painfully, reached out and touched Sarge's head. The dog leaned into the touch. If I do this, Douglas said, voice rough. If I help you, we do it right. No vigilante justice, no cutting corners. Everything by the book, federal law, proper procedure, airtight case. That's what I want, Garrett said. It won't be fast. Building a case like this takes time. Gathering evidence, getting testimonies, finding witnesses willing to go on record. We're talking weeks, maybe months. Evelyn has 5 days before they seize her house. Then we'll need to file for an emergency injunction, temporary restraining order to halt the seizure while we investigate. Douglas straightened up, looked at William. I'm going to need use of the church office, computer, printer, phone, space to work. Done, William said immediately. Douglas looked at Garrett. And I'm going to need you to convince at least 10 of those families to testify. 10 separate incidents, 10 separate contracts, 10 separate cases of usury and fraud. That's enough to establish pattern and practice. Enough to get federal attention. I'll get them. You don't know that. These people are terrified. They've been threatened, intimidated, broken down. Getting them to speak up. I'll get them, Garrett repeated. Because the alternative is watching Wade Kimball destroy another 43 families over the next 12 years. And I'm done watching. Douglas studied him, reading something, deciding something. All right, he said finally. All right, we'll try. But Garrett, you need to understand what you're starting here. Wade won't take this lying down. The moment he finds out people are organizing against him, he'll escalate. He'll get vicious. He'll come after you specifically because you're the one holding this together. Are you ready for that? Garrett thought about it, really thought about it. About his house, his savings, his quiet life of engines and solitude. Then he thought about Evelyn's face when those 2 men had cornered her, about the bruises on her wrist, about 43 families crushed under Wade's heel, about Kate's voice. Don't let your heart get as hard as the bolts you turn. I'm ready, he said. Then we start tomorrow. First Baptist, 8 a.m. Bring Evelyn's contract. Bring any other documentation you can get. We've got work to do. They left Douglas standing in his doorway. The old prosecutor watched them go, outlined against the darkness of his house. For the first time in 8 years, something in his eyes looked alive. On the drive back, William said, You know what you just did? Started a fight I might not win. Gave a broken man a reason to get out of bed. Gave him purpose. Gave him redemption. William glanced over. Same thing you did for yourself, whether you realize it or not. Garrett didn't answer. Just watched the streets of Ridgemont slide past. Familiar streets. Safe streets. Home. Except home wasn't safe anymore. Not for Evelyn, not for 22 other families, not for anyone as long as Wade Kimball operated with impunity. That night, Garrett couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, Kate's side still empty, still cold still, a daily reminder of absence, and stared at the ceiling. At 11:30, Sarge started barking. Urgent, continuous, the same bark he'd used when the intruder had broken in 5 years ago. Garrett was out of bed instantly. Shotgun from the closet, shells loaded. Moved to the window. Outside, a car was idling in the street. Headlights off, engine running. Black sedan. Same one from this morning. Garrett watched, waited. The car sat there for 5 minutes. Not moving, just present. A message. We know where you live. We're watching. Then it drove away. Slow, unhurried, confident. Garrett lowered the shotgun. His hands were steady. No fear, no rage, just cold calculation. Wade had made his first move, sending his people to watch, to intimidate, to remind Garrett that he was vulnerable. But Wade had made a mistake. He'd assumed fear would work, assumed an old man would back down, assumed threats were enough. Wade didn't know about Desert Storm, didn't know about 7 months in combat, didn't know about the kind of fear that came from artillery fire and chemical weapon alerts, and the absolute certainty that today might be the day you don't go home. A black sedan idling in the street. That wasn't fear. That was Tuesday. Garrett went back to bed. Sarge settled on the floor beside him. Guard mode never quite turning off. Both of them alert in the darkness. Tomorrow they'd start gathering the families. Start building the case. Start the long process of taking down Wade Kimball. But tonight, Wade had shown his hand. Had revealed that he knew about Garrett. Knew he was a threat. Good. Let him know. Let him worry. Let him wonder what an old mechanic with a dog and a sense of right and wrong could possibly do to hurt a man who owned a town. Wade would find out soon enough. The next morning, Garrett started making calls. The first number on William's list belonged to a couple named Patterson, Robert and Linda, both 74. They'd lost their home 3 years ago to Wade's loan. Now lived in a small apartment on the south side of town. Robert answered on the fourth ring, voice wary, suspicious. Mr. Patterson, my name is Garrett Holloway. Pastor William gave me your number. I'm calling about Wade Kimball. Silence on the other end. Then I don't talk about that. I understand, but I'm gathering people who've been hurt by Wade, building a case, legal case, federal prosecutors involved, and I need, the line went dead. Garrett tried again, same result. Robert wouldn't even let him finish a sentence. The second call went to a widow named Margaret Sterling, 68. Lost her husband to suicide after Wade seized their property. She listened to Garrett's pitch, then said very quietly, Mr. Holloway, my husband put a gun in his mouth because of what Wade did to us, because of the shame, because he couldn't face me anymore. If I testify, if I speak against Wade, he'll make sure everyone knows every detail of how we failed, how we lost everything. He'll drag my husband's name through the mud. I can't do that to his memory. I'm sorry. She hung up, gentle, polite, absolute. The third call, the fourth, the fifth. Same pattern. Fear, shame, refusal. By noon, Garrett had called 15 of the 22 families. 0 had agreed to testify. Most hung up before he finished explaining. 2 threatened to call the police if he contacted them again. He sat at his kitchen table, the list in front of him. 14 names left to try. 0 success rate. This was the problem Douglas had warned about. The problem William had seen before. People were too scared, too broken, too certain that fighting Wade was suicide. Sarge whined, pushed his head under Garrett's hand. Comfort gesture. Not giving up, boy, Garrett said. Just recalculating. He thought about it. About why people were saying no. Not because they didn't want justice. Because they didn't believe justice was possible. Because they'd seen Wade win too many times. Because they were alone and scared and convinced that one person couldn't make a difference. One person couldn't. But what about 22? What if instead of calling them individually, instead of asking each family to be brave in isolation, what if he brought them together? What if he showed them they weren't alone? Garrett picked up the phone, called William. I need the church, he said. Tonight, 7 p.m. I need you to personally call every family on that list. Tell them to come. Tell them it's important. Tell them, he paused. Tell them it's time to stop being victims. William was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll make the calls. But Garrett, if they don't show, if we get 2 or 3 people rattling around in that big fellowship hall, they'll show, Garrett said. They're scared, but they're also angry. They're also tired of being ashamed. They just need to see they're not the only ones, that there's strength in numbers. I hope you're right. So do I. Garrett spent the afternoon preparing. He drove to Evelyn's house. She was sitting on her porch staring at nothing. The kind of stare that comes from shock settling into depression. Meeting tonight, Garrett said without preamble. First Baptist Church, 7 p.m. Other families who've been hurt by Wade, we're organizing, building a case. I need you there. Evelyn looked at him. I can't face them. They'll know I'm just like them. Another fool who signed a contract she didn't understand. Exactly. You're just like them, which means they need to see you, need to know you're fighting back, that it's possible. Is it possible? Don't know yet, Garrett said honestly, but I know doing nothing guarantees Wade wins. Doing something gives us a chance. She was quiet for a long time. Then, Will you be there, you and Sarge? Every step. Then I'll come. That evening, Garrett rode to First Baptist with Sarge in the sidecar. The church was lit up against the darkening sky. White steeple, red brick. The kind of church that had stood in the center of Ridgemont for 70 years and probably would stand for 70 more. Inside, the fellowship hall was set up with folding chairs in a rough circle. William was there. Douglas, too, looking more alert than yesterday. Cleaner. Like he'd actually showered. Evelyn arrived 10 minutes early. Garrett helped her with the wheelchair ramp. She looked terrified. 7 p.m. came and went. The circle of chairs stayed mostly empty. 7:15. One couple arrived. The Pattersons, Robert and Linda. They sat in the back. Didn't make eye contact. 7:20. Margaret Sterling, the widow. She looked like she'd been crying. 7:30. Garrett was starting to think this had been a mistake, that he'd miscalculated, that fear was too strong and hope too weak. Then the door opened. A man walked in, late 60s, military bearing. He looked around the room, saw the small group, nodded once. Harvey Stillwell, he said. Wade Kimball took my business, my savings, almost took my marriage. Where do I sign up? 2 minutes later, another family, then another, then 3 at once. By 8 p.m., there were 18 people in the fellowship hall, 18 out of 22, more than Garrett had dared to hope for. William stood up. Let's begin. He led them through introductions. Each person stood, said their name, told their story, how Wade had approached them, what he'd taken, what it had cost. The stories were devastating. Homes lost, marriages destroyed, children who'd stopped talking to parents out of shame, grandchildren who'd never know the family property because it had been seized. But something else happened too. As people spoke, as they heard their own pain reflected in others' experiences, something shifted. The shame started dissolving. The isolation started breaking down. They weren't alone. They weren't uniquely foolish. They were victims of a systematic predator who'd refined his tactics over 12 years. When the last person finished speaking, Douglas stood up. What Wade Kimball has done to you is illegal, he said. His voice was strong, certain. The voice of a man who'd prosecuted hundreds of criminals and knew guilt when he saw it. Usury, fraud, extortion, these are federal crimes. And with your help, we can prove it. We can stop him. How? Robert Patterson asked. We tried before. He always wins. He wins because he isolates you, picks you off one by one, makes you think you're alone, but you're not alone anymore. There are 18 of you, 18 separate cases, 18 pieces of evidence. That's not an isolated incident. That's a criminal enterprise. What do you need from us? Margaret Sterling asked. Your contracts, your payment records, your testimony, everything documented, everything on record. We build a case so airtight that even Wade's lawyers can't break it. Then we take it to the FBI. The FBI didn't help before, someone said, before they had 1 or 2 complaints. Now they'll have 18. Before they had local victims afraid to speak. Now they'll have federal pattern and practice. Before they had a sheriff who could bury complaints. Now they'll have a former federal prosecutor who knows exactly how to navigate their bureaucracy. Douglas looked around the room. I won't lie to you. This will be hard. Wade will fight back. He'll threaten you, harass you, try to make you quit. But if we stand together, if we support each other, if we refuse to back down, we can win. Harvey Stillwell stood up. I'm in. One by one, the others stood too. 18 people, 18 families, 18 voices that had been silent for too long. We'll need to move fast, Douglas said. Evelyn's house is scheduled for seizure in 4 days. I'll file for an emergency injunction tomorrow morning. That should buy us time. But we need to start gathering evidence immediately. I'll need to meet with each of you individually. Get your stories on record. Copy your contracts. Build the timeline. What about Sheriff Kimball, someone asked. He'll come after us. Let him, Garrett said. He'd been quiet until now, just watching, just listening. But now he stood. Let him come. Let Wade come. Let all of them come. Because here's what they're going to find. They're not dealing with scared individuals anymore. They're dealing with a community. And communities don't break as easy as people. Sarge, who'd been lying quietly near Evelyn's wheelchair, stood up, shook himself, then walked to the center of the circle. Sat down. Like he was claiming this space, this group, this purpose. The meeting ran until 10 p.m. By the end, they'd organized into a working group. Douglas would coordinate the legal strategy. William would provide space and emotional support. Garrett would be the point person, the one who'd interface with law enforcement, handle logistics, keep everyone connected. And everyone, all 18 families, would support each other, share information, watch each other's backs, stand together against whatever Wade threw at them. As people filed out, Evelyn wheeled over to Garrett. Thank you. she said quietly. For this. For not giving up when everyone else said no. Didn't do it alone. No, but you started it. You made the first call. You took the first risk. That matters. Harvey Stillwell approached, extended his hand to Garrett. Whatever you need, I'm here. Appreciate it. Harvey hesitated. Then, one thing you should know, Wade's got people everywhere. Informants. I wouldn't trust anyone who wasn't in this room tonight. Noted. But later driving home with Sarge Garrett thought about Harvey's warning. About informants. About Wade's reach. About the fact that in a group of 18 people, all desperate, all vulnerable, all potentially bribable, there might be someone who wasn't as committed as they seemed. Someone who might report back to Wade. Who might sabotage the effort from inside. It was a risk, but it was a risk they'd have to take. Because the alternative, doing nothing, wasn't acceptable anymore. That night the black sedan came back, parked in the same spot, same message. But this time Garrett didn't just watch. He walked outside, stood on his porch, looked directly at the car. He couldn't see who was inside, tinted windows, but they could see him. He raised one hand, not a wave, not a threat, just acknowledgement. I see you. I'm not afraid. Come at me if you want. I'll be right here. The car sat there for another minute, then drove away. Garrett went back inside. Sarge was waiting. Guard mode never quite turning off. Tomorrow we file the injunction, Garrett said to the dog. Tomorrow we officially go to war with Wade Kimball. You ready for that, boy? Sarge's tail thumped once against the floor. Ready. Always ready. Because that's what guard dogs did. They protected. They stood their ground. They didn't back down when things got dangerous. They stood up, stood firm, stood together. And tomorrow Wade Kimball was going to learn that sometimes when good people finally decide to stand together, even predators have to back down. Or burn. The emergency injunction was filed at 8:30 the following morning. Douglas drove to the county courthouse in his car, a 15-year-old Toyota that needed a new muffler and smelled like old coffee and determination. Garrett rode shotgun. Sarge claimed the back seat. The clerk at the filing window was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and the expression of someone who'd processed 10,000 identical forms and expected 10,000 more. She took Douglas's paperwork without comment, stamped it, assigned a case number, said a judge would review it within 48 hours. 48 hours, Garrett said as they walked back to the car. Evelyn's seizure is scheduled for 72 hours from now. That's cutting it close. It's the best we can do. The legal system moves at its own pace. Can't rush it. Wade can. Wade doesn't follow the rules. That's his weakness. We do. That's our strength. Douglas unlocked the car. Besides, even if the injunction doesn't come through in time, the fact that we've filed it means Wade knows we're fighting back. That changes the calculus. He can't just seize the property quietly anymore. There's a legal challenge on record. Media might pick it up. Questions will be asked. Wade hates questions. They drove back to Ridgemont in silence. Sarge watched the landscape slide past desert scrub distant mountain sky, so blue it hurt to look at. The kind of country that made you feel small and significant at the same time. At First Baptist, the work had already begun. The fellowship hall had been transformed into a war room. Tables covered with contracts, payment records, correspondence. A timeline taped to one wall showing 12 years of Wade's predatory lending. Photographs of the 18 families pinned beside their stories. William was organizing files. Margaret Sterling was on the phone calling the remaining 4 families from the original list who hadn't shown up last night. Harvey Stillwell was setting up a laptop he'd brought from home, transferring scanned documents to a shared drive. Evelyn was there too, wheelchair positioned at one of the tables, reading through her own contract with a highlighter, marking every clause that seemed questionable. You made it, she said when Garrett walked in. Filed the paperwork. Now we wait. I'm not good at waiting. Nobody is. He pulled up a chair beside her. How's the contract review going? Terrifying. The more I read, the worse it gets. The interest compounds monthly instead of yearly. There's a balloon payment clause I never saw. In this section here, she pointed, basically says Wade can accelerate the full debt at any time for any reason. Or no reason. It's not a contract. It's a trap disguised as help. Douglas appeared over her shoulder. That's exactly what I need. Keep highlighting. Make notes in the margins. Every predatory clause, every unconscionable term, every piece of fine print designed to destroy the borrower. We'll use all of it. The morning became a blur of activity. Douglas interviewed each family individually, recording their testimony on an old cassette recorder he'd dug out of storage. The stories were consistent. Wade approached veterans or veteran families, offered loans with friendly terms and minimal documentation, rushed them through signing, then enforced the contract with ruthless precision once they couldn't pay. By noon, they had a pattern. By 2 p.m., they had a timeline. By 4 p.m., they had enough documented evidence to fill 3 bankers' boxes. "This is good," Douglas said, surveying the work. "This is really good. Federal prosecutors love patterns, love documentation, love cases that tell themselves. We're building something here." "How long until we can take it to the FBI?" Garrett asked. "Need to get it organized first. Write a summary brief, prepare the exhibits. Do this right, it's another week of work." "We don't have a week." "I know, but if we rush it, if we submit something sloppy, they'll reject it out of hand. Federal agencies are bureaucracies. They follow procedures. We have to play their game." Harvey Stillwell looked up from the laptop. "Speaking of games, Wade knows we're organizing. Word's spreading. Someone in this room is going to get a visit. Maybe all of us." "Let him visit," Margaret Sterling said. She'd been quiet most of the day, but now her voice was firm. "Let him threaten. I'm done being scared of that man." The others murmured agreement, but Garrett could see it in their faces. The fear was still there, just buried under determination. Fragile, temporary. Fear would come back. Wade would make sure of it. As if summoned by thought, the fellowship hall door opened. A man walked in, early 50s, expensive suit, briefcase. The kind of polished presentation that screamed lawyer. Behind him, 2 more men, not as polished, not as friendly, muscle and business casual. "Good afternoon," the lawyer said. His voice was smooth, professional. "My name is Richard Brenner. I represent Mr. Wade Kimball. I'm looking for Garrett Holloway and Mrs. Evelyn Brennan." Garrett stood. "I'm Holloway." "Excellent. Is there somewhere private we can talk?" "Anything you need to say, you can say here." Brenner smiled, cold, calculated. "Very well. Mr. Kimball is aware of your activities, the meetings, the organization of his former clients, the filing of frivolous legal motions. He wants you to understand that these actions constitute harassment, defamation, interference with legitimate business operations, and he's prepared to pursue legal remedies if they continue." "Legal remedies," Douglas said. He'd moved to stand beside Garrett, "such as civil suits for damages, restraining orders, criminal complaints for stalking and intimidation. Mr. Kimball is a respected businessman. Your client and her associates are attempting to destroy his reputation based on their own financial irresponsibility." "Financial irresponsibility?" Evelyn's voice cut through the room, sharp, angry. "Is that what you call a 38% interest rate predatory lending targeting elderly veterans?" Brenner turned to her. His smile never wavered. "Mrs. Brennan, your late husband signed a contract voluntarily. Read the terms. Agreed to them. The fact that you now regret that decision doesn't make the contract invalid. The contract is unconscionable, illegal under Arizona usury laws. That's a matter for courts to decide, and courts tend to rule that adults are responsible for contracts they sign, even when those adults make poor financial choices." The room had gone very quiet. Garrett could feel the temperature dropping, the determination in people's faces flickering. Brenner's words were precision weapons, designed to hit where it hurt most: shame, doubt, fear. "Here's what's going to happen," Brenner continued. "Mr. Kimball is willing to be reasonable. He'll reduce Mrs. Brennan's debt by 10% if she withdraws her legal motion and signs a non-disclosure agreement. He'll extend similar offers to the rest of you. 10% reduction, payment plans, but only if you cease these activities. Stop organizing, stop harassing, stop making defamatory statements." "And if we don't," Harvey asked, "then Mr. Kimball will pursue every legal avenue available to him. He has substantial resources, excellent legal representation, and a proven track record of winning these disputes. Ask yourselves, do you really want to spend years in court, accumulate legal fees you can't afford, risk losing what little you have left?" Brenner reached into his briefcase, pulled out a stack of documents. "I have settlement agreements here, pre-drafted, ready to sign. 10% reduction takes effect immediately. You walk out of here today with lighter debts and no legal exposure, or you continue down this path and face the consequences." He set the stack on the nearest table. "Let it sit there. Temptation in paper form." Nobody moved. The silence stretched, thick, heavy. Garrett could feel the group's resolve cracking. These were people who'd already lost everything once, who'd spent years drowning in debt and shame. 10% wasn't much, but it was something, and something was more than the nothing they currently had. "One more thing," Brenner said. "Mr. Kimball asked me to remind you that he has friends throughout this community, business partners, political connections, people who depend on his goodwill. If you continue to attack him, those people will be forced to choose sides, and they won't choose you. It was a threat, barely disguised. Keep fighting and we'll make you pariahs. Keep fighting and you'll lose more than just your homes. Brenner smiled. I'll give you 24 hours to consider. My contact information is on the agreements. Call anytime. He turned to leave. His two companions followed. At the door, he paused. Mr. Holloway, a word of advice. You're new to this. You don't understand the situation you've inserted yourself into. Mr. Kimball has been generous so far, but his patience has limits. Walk away while you still can. Then they were gone. The fellowship hall erupted. 10% is better than nothing. It's a trap he's trying to divide us. We can't fight him. He's too powerful. We have to try. Voices overlapping. Panic spreading. The careful unity they'd built starting to fracture under pressure. Garrett didn't raise his voice, didn't try to shout over the chaos. He just stood there, waiting. Sarge moved to his side, sat, steady presence in a room that was losing its center. Eventually the noise died down. People looked at him, waiting for direction, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. 10%, Garrett said quietly. That's what Wade's offering. 10% reduction in exchange for your silence, for your compliance, for your agreement to pretend he didn't destroy your lives. He let that sit for a moment. Here's what he's not offering. He's not offering to return the homes he seized, not offering to apologize for the suicides his practices caused, not offering to stop doing this to the next 43 families. He's offering you 10% off the chains he locked around your necks, and in exchange, you help him lock those same chains around someone else. Robert Patterson stood up. But Garrett, we're old. We're tired. We don't have the strength for a years-long legal battle. 10% might be all we can realistically get. You're right, Garrett said. You are old. You are tired. So am I. I'm 67. My knees hurt. My back hurts. I wake up some mornings and can barely get out of bed. But you know what hurts more than aging regret? Looking back and knowing you had a chance to stand up to evil and chose not to because it was easier to take the scraps he offered. He walked to the center of the room. Sarge followed. My wife died 20 months ago, in the time since I've been a ghost. Going through motions, fixing engines because engines don't ask questions, don't demand emotion, don't require me to care. I thought that was safer. Thought not caring meant not hurting. His voice got quieter, more raw. But yesterday I sat in this room and listened to 18 people tell stories about losing everything, about shame so deep they couldn't look their own children in the eye, about giving up, about wanting to die. And I realized something. The opposite of caring isn't safety. It's death. Maybe not physical death, but the death of everything that makes us human. He looked around the room, met eyes, held gazes. Wade Kimball is offering you 10%. I'm offering you something else, your dignity, your self-respect, the knowledge that you stood up when it mattered, that you fought back when everyone said you'd lose, that you chose the hard right over the easy wrong. Margaret Sterling was crying, quietly, tears running down her face. My husband put a gun in his mouth because of Wade Kimball, because he couldn't face me, couldn't face himself, couldn't live with the shame. Her voice broke. If I take Wade's offer now, if I accept his money and sign his paper and promise to be quiet, what does that say about my husband's death? That it was meaningless? That I value 10% more than I value justice for the man I loved? She shook her head. No, I won't do it. I won't take his money. I won't sign his paper. I won't be quiet. Harvey stood. Neither will I. One by one, the others stood. Evelyn, Robert, and Linda. All 18 families, standing together, choosing the hard path, choosing dignity over discount. Douglas had been watching from the side. Now he stepped forward. You just did something remarkable, he said. His voice was thick. You chose principle over pragmatism, justice over expedience. That's rare. That's powerful. That's how we win. The group spent the rest of the afternoon fortifying their case. More details, more documentation, more preparation for the battle ahead. At 6 p.m., Garrett's phone rang. Unknown number. He stepped outside to answer. Holloway, Mr. Holloway, this is Agent Naomi Pritchard, FBI field office in Phoenix. Do you have a moment? Garrett's pulse quickened. Yes, ma'am. I received a complaint today from a lawyer named Richard Brenner. Claims you and several others are engaged in harassment and defamation of his client, Wade Kimball. He's demanding an investigation. That's interesting timing. We were about to contact you about Wade Kimball ourselves. A pause. Go on, Garrett explained. The pattern, the 18 families, the predatory lending, the evidence they'd gathered. Naomi was quiet when he finished. Then, Mr. Holloway, I need you to understand something. Loan sharking cases are difficult. Victims often recant, evidence disappears, and if local law enforcement is compromised, it becomes nearly impossible to prosecute. I understand. But, another pause. My father was a veteran. Desert Storm, same as you. He came home and got caught up with a loan shark in Nevada. Lost everything. Killed himself when I was 17. Garrett closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I became an FBI agent because of that. Because I wanted to stop people like the man who destroyed my father. So when you tell me there's a loan shark in Arizona who's been operating for 12 years, who's targeting veterans, who's driven people to suicide, that gets my attention. What do you need from us? Evidence, lots of it, organized, documented, and I need victims willing to testify, not just affidavits, actual testimony, on record, under oath. Can you provide that? Yes. How many victims are willing to go on record? 18 so far, possibly more. Naomi's breath caught. 18. That's substantial. That's enough to establish pattern and practice. That's enough to build a RICO case if the evidence supports it. What's your timeline? I need 72 hours to review what you have. If it's as strong as you say, I can open an official investigation. But Mr. Holloway, the moment I do that, Wade Kimball will know. He'll escalate. He'll destroy evidence. He'll threaten witnesses. Things will get dangerous. They're already dangerous. They'll get worse. Are your people ready for that? Garrett looked through the window. 18 families working together, supporting each other, standing together. Yes, he said, we're ready. Then send me everything you have, encrypted email. I'll send you the address, and Mr. Holloway, be careful. Men like Wade Kimball don't surrender. They burn everything down rather than lose. The call ended. Garrett stood in the parking lot for a moment, letting it sink in. The FBI was interested, actually interested. There was a path forward, a real one. He went back inside, told the group. The energy shifted immediately. Hope, fragile but real. 72 hours, Douglas said. That's tight but doable. We work through the night if we have to. Get everything organized, every contract, every testimony, every piece of evidence. Make it impossible for the FBI to say no. They worked until midnight, then started again at 6 a.m. the next morning. Douglas coordinated. William kept everyone fed and caffeinated. Harvey managed the digital files. Garrett kept morale up, moving from person to person, listening, encouraging, reminding them why this mattered. Sarge stayed with Evelyn mostly. The dog had claimed her as his primary charge. Wherever she went, Sarge followed. Guard mode permanently engaged. By noon on the second day, they had everything compiled. Douglas wrote a 20-page summary brief. Harvey created a digital archive with encrypted backups. The case was as strong as they could make it. Garrett sent it to Agent Pritchard. Then they waited. The response came 8 hours later. Short, professional. Received, under review. Will contact within 48 hours. Stay safe. Stay safe, like that was possible. That night, things escalated. Garrett was home, asleep. Sarge on the floor beside the bed. Both of them exhausted from 2 days of constant work. At 2:15 a.m., Sarge started barking. Not the alert bark, the threat bark, aggressive, urgent. Garrett was up instantly. Shotgun, moved to the window. Outside, his garage was on fire. Not a small fire, not an accident. The entire structure engulfed in flames. Orange light painting the street. Smoke billowing into the night sky. Garrett ran outside, barefoot, shotgun in one hand, phone in the other. Called 911. Fire at 896 Cottonwood Lane. Garage fire, spreading fast. The operator asked questions. Garrett answered on autopilot. His mind was racing. This wasn't accidental. This was message. This was Wade. Sirens in the distance. Getting closer. Fire truck, police. Neighbors emerging from houses, standing on lawns watching. The fire department arrived 6 minutes later. By then, the garage was a total loss. They focused on keeping the flames from spreading to the house. Managed to contain it. But everything in the garage, tools, equipment, the Honda CB 750 he'd been restoring, gone. Ash and twisted metal. Sheriff Dalton Kimball arrived with the fire truck. He surveyed the scene, talked to the fire chief, then walked over to Garrett. Terrible thing, Dalton said. His voice was neutral, professionally concerned. Any idea how it started? You tell me. Excuse me. Your brother did this. You know it. I know it. Everyone here knows it. Dalton's face hardened. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Holloway. You have proof. Not yet. Then I'd be careful about making defamatory statements. Might find yourself facing legal consequences on top of property loss. Dalton looked at the burning garage. Fire chief says it looks like faulty wiring. Old building. Happens all the time. Lucky it didn't spread to your house. Lucky. Insurance should cover most of it, assuming you kept up with your premiums. Dalton smiled. Cold. You did keep up with your premiums, didn't you? Garrett didn't answer. Just stared at the sheriff until the man got uncomfortable and walked away. The fire was extinguished by 4 a.m. The fire chief confirmed Dalton's assessment. Faulty wiring, accidental, nothing suspicious. Garrett knew better. But knowing and proving were different things. As the sun came up, he stood in front of the smoking remains of his garage. Everything he'd built over 40 years, every tool he'd collected, every project he'd started, gone. Sarge pressed against his leg. Solid, present, still here. William arrived at 6:30. Took one look at the destruction and closed his eyes. Wade. Yeah. This is my fault. I should have warned you. Should have told you how far he'd go. Wouldn't have changed anything. Still would have helped Evelyn. Still would have organized the families. This just proves we're right. Proves Wade's scared. Scared men are dangerous men. So are determined ones. By 8 a.m., word had spread. The 18 families started showing up, standing in solidarity, offering help, offering support. Harvey brought his tools. We'll rebuild it, all of us, together. Margaret brought food. You need to eat, can't fight on an empty stomach. Evelyn came last, wheelchair rolling up the driveway. She looked at the destruction, then at Garrett. This is because of me, she said quietly, because you helped me. This is because of Wade, not you, never you. You've lost everything. I've lost a building, that's not everything. He gestured at the families gathered around. This is everything. People standing together, refusing to back down. Wade can burn my garage. Can't burn that. Evelyn started crying. Sarge moved to her, put his head on her knee, comfort position. Agent Pritchard called at 10 a.m. Mr. Holloway, I heard about the fire. You all right? Fine. How'd you hear? I made some calls last night. Started asking around about Wade Kimball. Apparently that triggered something because 3 hours later, your garage is burning. That's not coincidence. Can you prove it? Not yet, but I'm opening an official investigation. As of this morning, Wade Kimball is under federal scrutiny. Loan sharking, racketeering, possible arson. I've got approval to surveil his operations, monitor his communications, the whole apparatus. How long until you can arrest him? Weeks, maybe months. Federal cases take time. We need ironclad evidence. Can't afford mistakes. Evelyn's house seizure is tomorrow. We still don't have the injunction. I'm aware. I've contacted the judge, explained that the seizure is part of an ongoing federal investigation. Asked for a delay. Can't guarantee results, but I'm trying. Appreciate it. Mr. Holloway, I want you to know something. What you've done organizing these families standing up to Wade building this case, it's exactly what we need. But it's also made you a target. Wade's going to come after you harder now. Are you prepared for that? Garrett looked at the smoking remains of his garage, at the families standing around him, at Sarge still comforting Evelyn. Yeah, he said. I'm prepared. The call ended. Douglas appeared from the crowd. The injunction came through 10 minutes ago. Judge granted a temporary restraining order halting any property seizure pending investigation of the underlying contracts. Evelyn's house is safe for now. The relief was palpable. Evelyn collapsed forward sobbing. Not sad crying, release crying. The kind that comes when pressure you've been holding for months suddenly lifts. But Garrett knew this was just the beginning. Wade had escalated, burned a garage, sent a message. Things would get worse before they got better. The question was, how much worse? The answer came that afternoon. Harvey Stillwell didn't show up for the scheduled meeting at the church. Garrett called. No answer. Called again. Still nothing. Something felt wrong. Garrett drove to Harvey's house, a small place on the east side of town. Neat lawn, American flag. The kind of home a man took pride in. Harvey's car was in the driveway. Lights were on inside. But when Garrett knocked, no one answered. He tried the door, unlocked. Not unusual in Ridgemont. People trusted each other. Harvey, it's Garrett. No response. Garrett stepped inside. Sarge with him. The dog's body language shifted immediately. Alert, tense, something wrong. They found Harvey in the kitchen, sitting at the table. Very still, face pale. A gun on the table in front of him. Not pointed at anything. Just sitting there. Harvey. The man looked up. His eyes were dead. Empty. They came this morning, Harvey said. His voice was flat. Wade's men said if I don't withdraw from the group, if I don't stop cooperating with you, they'll go after my daughter. She lives in Phoenix, has 2 kids. They showed me pictures. Pictures of my grandchildren at school, playing in their yard. They know where my family lives. They know their routines. Garrett felt ice in his veins. Harvey, I can't do it. I can't risk them. I thought I was strong enough. Thought I could stand up to Wade. But my grandkids, his voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't. It's okay. I understand. No, you don't. You don't have kids. Don't have grandkids. Don't have anyone they can threaten. I do, and I can't let them get hurt because of me. Harvey picked up the gun. For a terrible moment, Garrett thought he was going to use it. But Harvey just held it, looking at it, like he was considering options he shouldn't have to consider. Harvey, put the gun down. Why? What's the point? If I keep fighting, Wade hurts my family. If I quit, I'm a coward who let him win. Either way, I lose. You don't lose. You protect what matters most. Your family. That's not cowardice. That's love. Then why do I feel like I'm betraying everyone? Garrett sat down across from him. Slow movements, non-threatening. Because you're a good man. Good men feel guilt when they can't save everyone. But Harvey, you're not responsible for Wade's evil. You're only responsible for your choices. And choosing to protect your grandchildren, that's the right choice. Harvey was shaking. What about Evelyn? What about the others? We'll keep fighting, with or without you. That's not on you. That's on us. But if I quit, others will quit. The group will fall apart. Maybe, or maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll respect a man who knows what matters most and isn't afraid to admit it. They sat in silence, the gun still on the table, Harvey still holding it. Finally, he set it down, put his face in his hands, started crying. Deep, wrenching sobs, the kind that came from shame and relief and exhaustion all mixed together. Garrett waited, let him cry, didn't try to fix it, just stayed present. When Harvey finally got quiet, Garrett said, "Go to Phoenix, stay with your daughter for a while. Get your grandkids somewhere safe. When this is over, when Wade's in prison, you can come back." You really think you can put him in prison? Yes. How he owns this town. He owns the town, doesn't own the FBI, doesn't own federal law, doesn't own the truth. Garrett stood. Take care of your family, Harvey. That's your fight. This is mine. He left Harvey at the kitchen table, drove back to the church, broke the news to the group. The reaction was what he expected. Shock, anger, fear. If Wade could threaten Harvey's grandchildren, he could threaten anyone's family. 2 more families withdrew that afternoon, both with kids or grandkids they couldn't risk, both apologetic, both ashamed, both understanding that sometimes protecting family meant walking away from justice. 15 families left, down from 18. We're losing people, Margaret said. Wade's dividing us, picking us off. No, Garrett said. We're finding out who can go the distance. 15 people fully committed is stronger than 18 people half committed. We move forward with who we have. But that night alone in his house with Sarge, Garrett wondered if he was right, wondered if they could actually win this, wondered if Wade's resources and ruthlessness would eventually grind them down to nothing. His phone rang. Agent Pritchard. "Mr. Holloway, we have a problem. Another one. I've been ordered to slow down the investigation. Someone with influence made calls, political pressure. My supervisor wants me to focus on other cases. Says the Wade Kimball situation is not a priority." Garrett closed his eyes. "Wade got to your boss. Looks that way. I'm going to keep investigating on my own time. But officially, the Bureau is backing off. So we're on our own. For now. But Mr. Holloway, I meant what I said. My father died because of men like Wade. I'm not letting this go. Just need you to understand it'll take longer. Be harder. Require more evidence. How much more? Enough that my supervisors can't ignore it. Enough that the political pressure won't matter. We're talking overwhelming proof, smoking gun, something Wade can't talk his way out of. What if I could get you that? How? What if someone got Wade to confess on tape admitting to everything?" Naomi was quiet. "Then that would do it. But how would you get Wade to confess? He's not stupid. He's arrogant, and arrogant men make mistakes when they think they've won. What are you planning? Something stupid, probably illegal, definitely dangerous. Mr. Holloway, can't tell you more. Plausible deniability. But if I can get you that confession, will it be enough?" Another pause. "Yes. Taped confession admitting to pattern of illegal lending, extortion, and threats. That would be enough to arrest him immediately. Build charges from there. Then that's what I'll get you. Garrett, don't do anything that'll get you killed. Wade's dangerous. So am I when someone burns my garage and threatens my friends." He hung up, sat in the darkness, thinking, planning. Sarge watched him, patient, waiting for direction. "We're going to do something dumb, boy," Garrett said to the dog. "Something Kate would yell at me for. Something that might get us both killed." "You in?" Sarge's tail thumped against the floor. "Always in, because that's what partners did. They stood together, faced danger together. Didn't back down even when backing down was the smart choice." Garrett picked up his phone, dialed the number on the settlement agreement Richard Brenner had left. Brenner answered on the second ring. "Mr. Holloway, changed your mind about settlement?" "No, I want to meet Wade face to face, man to man. No lawyers, no witnesses. Just him and me. We settle this like adults." "That's Unusual. Tell him I'm offering him a deal. I walk away, drop the case, convince the others to walk away. In exchange, he reduces Evelyn's debt to zero and leaves her house alone. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired. Because my garage is ash. Because I'm 67 years old and I don't have the energy for a years-long legal battle. Wade wins. I'm acknowledging that. But I want something for Evelyn before I quit. Brenner was quiet, calculating. I'll pass the message along. But Mr. Holloway, if this is some kind of trap, it's not a trap. It's surrender. Wade should understand that. He's good at making people surrender. The call ended. Garrett sat back. The plan was forming. Risky, probably suicidal. But if it worked, if he could get Wade alone, get him talking, get him to admit to everything while wearing a wire, that was a big if. About a dozen big ifs stacked on top of each other. But it was the only play they had left. Wade called the next morning. Direct, not through his lawyer. His voice was smooth, confident, victorious. Garrett Holloway, heard you want to talk. That's right. Smart man. Took you long enough to realize you can't win. Guess I'm slow. Where and when? Your pawn shop, tonight, 9 p.m., just you and me. Why would I agree to that? Because you want to look me in the eye when I admit defeat. Because you want to savor your victory. Because you're the kind of man who needs witnesses to know you've won, and I'm offering to be that witness. Wade laughed. You're right about that. Okay, tonight, 9 p.m., my shop. Come alone. Bring your surrender in writing. I will. And Garrett, bring that dog of yours. I want to see the look in his eyes when his master breaks. The line went dead. Garrett sat there, adrenaline starting to flow. This was it, the endgame. He called Douglas, told him the plan. This is insane, Douglas said. Wade could kill you, bury your body in the desert. No one would ever find you. That's why I need you ready. If I don't call by 10 p.m., you contact Agent Pritchard. Tell her everything. Give her all the evidence. Make sure Wade doesn't get away with it. Garrett, I'm doing this. Only question is whether you'll back me up. Long silence, then I'll be ready. But for the record, this is the stupidest thing I've heard in 30 years of law practice. Noted. Garrett spent the day preparing. He borrowed a wire from a friend who did private investigation work. Tiny microphone. Hidden recorder. The kind divorce lawyers use to catch cheating spouses. He tested it. Worked perfectly. Now he just had to hope Wade wouldn't search him. Hope arrogance would override caution. At 8 p.m., Garrett fed Sarge, double portion. If something went wrong, if he didn't come back, he wanted the dog to have eaten well. You're not coming this time, boy, Garrett said. This one's too dangerous. Sarge whined. Protest. I know, but I need you here. Need you safe. If something happens to me, you go to Evelyn. She'll take care of you. Understand? The dog stared at him, those brown eyes full of intelligence and loyalty, and something that looked almost like disapproval. I'm sorry, but this is how it has to be. Garrett left Sarge at the church with William. The pastor promised to keep the dog safe, to wait for word, to act if word didn't come. Then Garrett rode his Harley to Wade's pawn and loan. The shop was on the edge of town, standalone building, bars on windows, single entrance. The kind of place that screamed illegal business but dared anyone to prove it. A single car in the lot, expensive, Mercedes, Wade's. Garrett parked, checked the wire one more time, activated, recording. Backup battery good for 3 hours. He walked to the door. It opened before he could knock. Wade Kimball stood there, 54 years old, overweight but carrying it like authority rather than weakness. Expensive suit, rings on fingers. Watch that cost more than most people's cars, the physical embodiment of predatory success. Garrett Holloway, come in. The shop interior was what Garrett expected. Glass cases full of pawn jewelry, shelves of electronics, guitars, guns, all the things desperate people sold when they needed money fast. Wade led him to a back office. Nice space, leather chairs, mahogany desk, whiskey decanter. The office of a man who wanted you to know he'd won. Sit. Garrett sat, the wire pressed against his chest. Invisible. Silent. Recording. Wade poured 2 glasses of whiskey, slid one across the desk. To surrender, Wade said. Raised his glass. Garrett didn't touch his. Let's talk terms first. Terms, right. You want Evelyn Brennan's debt forgiven? House free and clear. That's your price for walking away? Yes. Wade took a sip, savored it. No. No. You don't get to negotiate. You lost. Losers don't set terms. Wade leaned back. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to convince every single family in your little rebellion to accept my settlement offer. 10% reduction. NDAs all around. Complete silence. Then maybe I'll consider being generous with Mrs. Brennan. That wasn't the deal. There is no deal. There's only me telling you how this ends. You comply or I destroy every single person who stood with you. Harvey Stillwell was just the start. I know where they all live, know where their families live. I will systematically dismantle their lives until there's nothing left. Garrett felt cold rage building, but he kept his voice level, neutral. Why? Why target veterans? Why go after people who served this country? Wade smiled. Because they're easy marks, proud, stubborn, bad with money. They'd rather die than admit they need help. Perfect combination for my business model. Your business model is loan sharking. My business model is providing capital to people banks won't touch. If the terms are aggressive, well, that's the cost of high-risk lending. 38% interest is criminal. It's whatever people agree to. They sign the contract. They take the money. Their failure to read the fine print isn't my problem. Keep him talking. Get him admitting. Get everything on record. How many people have you done this to? Enough to buy this building 3 rental properties and a vacation home in Sedona. Enough to fund a very comfortable life. Wade took another sip. Want to know the funny part? Most of them thanked me at first, grateful I gave them a chance when no one else would. The gratitude makes the betrayal later so much sweeter. Betrayal. When I take their houses. When I ruin them. The look on their faces when they realize the man who saved them is the same man destroying them. That's the best part. You're proud of this. I'm proud of being good at what I do. I identified a market, exploited it efficiently, made millions. That's capitalism, Garrett. That's America. That's evil. Wade laughed. Evil. Right. You military types always think in black and white. Good and evil. Heroes and villains. Real world doesn't work that way. Real world works on power. I have it. They don't. Simple. And the suicides, the families you destroyed, the people who killed themselves because of your loans, regrettable. But not my responsibility. I didn't pull the trigger. Didn't tie the noose. They made choices. Bad choices. Weak choices. 7 people. 7 families. 7 people too stupid to adapt, too proud to beg, too weak to survive. Darwin would be proud. Got it. All of it. Confession, motive, callousness. Everything Agent Pritchard needed. Garrett stood up. We're done here. Sit down. We're not done until I say we're done. I'm leaving. Wade pulled open a drawer, pulled out a gun. Not pointing it at Garrett, just setting it on the desk. Message clear. You're not leaving until we have an agreement. Until you promise to disband your little group. Until you guarantee everyone signs my settlement. And if I don't, then you have an accident. Motorcycle crash, terrible tragedy. Old man loses control, dies on impact. Sheriff Kimball, my brother, investigates, rules it accidental. Your friends get scared. Group falls apart anyway. But in that version, you're dead. You'd kill me over this. I've killed before. Harvey's predecessor, who tried to organize against me, died in a house fire. Another family's patriarch who went to the media drove his car into a bridge support, ruled suicidal. I don't like killing, but I do it when necessary. You're confessing to murder. I'm explaining consequences to a dead man because you're not leaving this room unless you agree. And even if you agree, I might kill you anyway. Just to make sure. Wade picked up the gun, checked the chamber. Loaded. See, Garrett, you made a mistake. You thought organizing people would protect you, thought numbers were safety, but all you did was paint a target on yourself. Make yourself the linchpin. Remove you, everything crumbles. He pointed the gun at Garrett's chest. Any last words? Yeah, you talk too much. Wade's face twisted. Confusion, anger. Then the door crashed open. Agent Naomi Pritchard, 3 FBI agents behind her, guns drawn. FBI, put the weapon down. Wade spun, pointed the gun at Naomi. Everything happened fast. Garrett lunged, grabbed Wade's wrist, twisted. The gun fired ceiling shot harmless. They fell together. Grappling, agents swarmed in, pulled Wade off, pinned him down, cuffed him. Naomi helped Garrett up. You okay? Fine, you got it, all of it. Every word, audio and video. We had agents outside with parabolic microphones, recorded everything. She looked at Wade now, face down on the floor, agents holding him secure. Wade Kimball, you're under arrest for loan sharking, racketeering, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 15 other federal charges I'm going to enjoy reading to you. Wade was screaming. Threats, curses, promises of lawyers and connections, and how he'd destroy them all. Nobody was listening. Outside, more agents were arriving. Sheriff Dalton Kimball pulled up, saw the FBI presence, tried to leave. Got stopped, cuffed, arrested for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. It was over. Actually over. Garrett stood in the parking lot, watching Wade being loaded into a federal vehicle, watching Dalton being read his rights, watching 12 years of predatory evil finally meeting justice. His phone rang. Douglas. Tell me you're alive. Alive. Wade's arrested. Dalton too. FBI has everything. Silence, then. You insane, brilliant, stupid man. You actually did it. We did it. All of us. Garrett called William next. It's done. Bring Sarge home. Then he called Evelyn, told her the news, heard her sob with relief. The church group gathered that night, all 15 families, plus the 3 who'd withdrawn. They'd heard the news, come back, wanted to be part of the celebration. Agent Pritchard was there too. She addressed the group. Wade Kimball is in federal custody. He'll be arraigned tomorrow. Based on his confession, which was helpfully recorded by Mr. Holloway, we're charging him with 43 counts of loan sharking, racketeering, extortion, and multiple counts of conspiracy to commit murder. He's looking at life in prison. Cheers, tears, hugs, relief cascading through the room like a wave. Additionally, Naomi continued, we're seizing Wade's assets. Every property, every account, every investment, all of it will be liquidated, used to compensate his victims. You'll get your money back, every dollar he took, with interest. More cheers. Louder this time. But I want to be clear. This happened because of you, because you stood up, because you refused to be silent, because one man, Garrett Holloway, decided that doing nothing wasn't acceptable. You saved yourselves. Remember that. The group turned to Garrett. He stood in the back, uncomfortable with attention, with praise, just wanting this to be over so he could go home and sleep for 3 days. But Evelyn wheeled forward, took his hand. Thank you, she said. Simple, profound. Thank you for seeing me, for helping me, for refusing to walk away when walking away was easier. Sarge helped too. He's the one who knew you were worth protecting. On cue, the dog appeared at Evelyn's side, sat, looked up at both of them. He knew what I was too scared to admit, Garrett said. That some battles choose you, that sometimes the only way through is together. That instinct, real instinct, never lies. Evelyn reached down, touched Sarge's head. The dog leaned into her touch. Full circle, the woman he'd protected, the man who'd fought for her, the dog who'd brought them together. 3 weeks later, the legal aftermath was still unfolding. Wade's assets were being liquidated. Dalton had resigned in disgrace. A special election was scheduled for new sheriff. The town was slowly healing. Garrett's garage was being rebuilt. The community had pooled resources, volunteered time. It wasn't finished yet, but the frame was up, progress visible. On a Saturday afternoon, Evelyn came by, walked not wheeled. The physical therapy had worked. Not perfectly. She still needed a cane, but she was walking. Physical therapy is hell, she said, sitting on his porch. But turns out when you have a reason to fight, you fight harder. What's your reason? Want to dance at your wedding? Garrett choked on his coffee. My what? Oh, come on. You think I don't notice the way you look at me? The way you've been showing up at my house every day for 3 weeks? Just checking in? The way Sarge divides his time between us like he's already decided we're a package deal. I'm 67. You're 71. Little old for romance. My husband died. Your wife died. We both know life's short. Too short to pretend we don't care about each other. She looked at him. I'm not saying get married tomorrow. I'm saying maybe we stop living alone. Stop grieving alone. Stop pretending we're fine when we're not. Garrett didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. Just sat there. Evelyn smiled. Think about it. No pressure. But Garrett, I'm tired of being alone. And I think you are too. She stood, kissed his cheek, walked to her car, driving now, hand controls installed. Garrett watched her go. Sarge sat beside him. The dog looked up, tail wagging slightly. Don't you start, Garrett muttered. Tail wagged harder. That night, Garrett stood in his rebuilt garage. Tools organized, new equipment installed, Honda CB 750 project resumed, everything back to normal, except nothing was normal. Normal was before Evelyn, before the fight, before he'd chosen to care again. Kate's voice, always present, whispered in memory, don't let your heart get as hard as the bolts you turn. He hadn't. The heart had stayed soft, had broken, had healed, had opened again. Garrett looked at the photo he'd hung on the new garage wall. Kate, smiling, forever young, forever missed. I think I'm ready, he said to the photo. Not to forget you, never that, but to live again, to let someone else in, to stop being afraid of losing because I'm more afraid of never trying. The photo didn't answer. Photos never did. But in the silence, Garrett felt something. Permission, maybe, or blessing. Or just the recognition that grief and love weren't opposites. They coexisted, made room for each other, made room for new chapters while honoring old ones. His phone buzzed. Text from Evelyn. Dinner tomorrow. My place, I'm cooking. Garrett smiled, texted back. I'll be there. What time? 6. Bring Sarge. He's part of the package. Garrett looked at the dog. Sarge looked back, calm, certain, the way he'd been that first morning at the diner when he'd instantly shifted into guard mode for a stranger who needed protecting. Instinct never lies, and Sarge's instinct had been right from the start. About Evelyn, about the fight, about everything. "What do you think, boy, ready for whatever comes next?" Sarge's tail thumped against the floor. Always ready, because that's what family did. They stood together, protected each other, faced the future without knowing what it held, but knowing they wouldn't face it alone. Garrett Holloway had spent 20 months being alone, being safe, being half alive. He was done with that. Time to live again, time to love again, time to trust that some endings were really beginnings. And as Sarge settled beside him, as the Arizona sunset painted the sky orange and gold, as tomorrow promised dinner and conversation, and the terrifying possibility of hope Garrett felt for the first time since Kate died, like he was home. Not in a place, not in a building, in a life worth living. And that was everything.